This tutorial is going to cover advanced simulation effects, specifically rigid body dynamic simulations in 3ds Max. So the first one we're going to look at here is we're going to blow up a wall with our artillery gun here, and it'll look something like this. Obviously this is a rendered version, we're just really concerned with the viewport, but I've done this so you can see what's going to happen. So once again, so the projectile comes out, it's actually a kinematic, it hits the dynamic wall, which then falls and breaks down and hits the static ground plane. Okay, so let's get into it. So open up the scene Dynamic Sim A01 from Learning Spot, and we'll start off with this. So in this scene we've got our artillery gun, we've got our ground plane, and here in the top viewport we have a brick to get us started with our wall. So we've also got a camera in the scene so we can have a reference point to return to. That camera, if we open up the Manage Layers, resides up here in the Manage Layers under the default. So you can see I've just unhidden it and you can now see the camera. Let's just go back and hide that and close that again. So we've actually got our brick here selected. It resides on the brick layer, and you can see the brick layer is active. So any objects we now create in the scene will be created on the layer with the tick next to it. We've also got our ground layer with the ground plane, and we've got our gun artillery layer. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a static dynamic object out of the ground plane. So to do that, we need to right click in this grey area up here and go to the Mass Effects toolbar. You'll see this toolbar load up then. So here we've got basically the properties or the tools, how we can modify them. Here we've got our different types of rigid bodies. You've got like a cloth one, you can do constraints and ragdolls, and these are like your play preview controls up here. We won't be using these ones, we'll be using the ones in the Mass Effects tools. So let's select our ground plane in the viewport. Let's go to click on this set selected kinematic. So click and hold down with your left mouse button, and we're going to set this to the bottom one, set selected as static rigid body. So you can see we've now got this sort of line running across it. It has also applied a modifier to the ground plane. So that's all, we can leave that now. So here in the Manage Layers, let's just freeze that. So we're freezing it so we can't change it or do anything to it or select it. Okay, let's also freeze our gun artillery, and we can then just close down the Manage Layers. In the top viewport, let's marquee select our brick. Let's maximize that viewport, hold down Alt and hit W. Let's grab our move tool, so either we've got our move, rotate and scale, or you can hit W, E and R. So hit W for our move tool. Just move it to the top of the viewport there. We're going to now clone this 29 times to make 30 bricks lying on the ground there. So holding down Shift, we'll move our mouse pointer over the Y-axis here on the Move gizmo, and click and hold down with your left mouse button, drag over, just so there's a little gap in between them, and let go of the mouse button, then let go of Shift, and we've now cloned it. We're going to make the copies of this 29. We'll just leave the object type to copy, and we'll go OK. So now if I zoom out with my scroll wheel, you can see that we've got 30 bricks. I can go and select them here. Let's go into our left viewport by hitting L on the keyboard, and we'll zoom into our gizmo here with the bricks still selected. We'll hold down Shift, and we'll click and we'll drag our bricks up. And we'll just make sure they're a copy. We'll leave this at 1. So now we've just created 30 more bricks sitting on top. I'm going to click and drag with my on the Y, and I'm going to put that in the middle there. So now we've just offset the bricks as bricks normally are offset. Let's go hit T on the keyboard to go to the top viewport. Let's marquee select all of our bricks. Let's hit L again to go to our left viewport. Hit Z to zoom selected. So now what we want to do is we want to copy these up. I'm going to zoom into the gizmo here, holding down Shift. I'm going to click and drag that up, and let's make this 18. So we're going to make 18 copies of this. Go OK. let's hit P on our keyboard to go to perspective viewport. Let's hit Z to zoom. So let's hit F3. So you can see there, if we hit F4, we can get the edged faces as well. So we've created all our bricks. Just from experience, I can see here this one's going to topple because it's on the edge. So let's select it and hit delete. Okay, so all these bricks should now reside in this bricks layer in the manage layers. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to settle these bricks. Okay, so to do that, we're going to select them all, marquee around them all, go up to our rigid bodies, click, and we're going to go set selected as dynamic rigid body. So these, if I deselect and select one, you can see that all of them now have a Mass Effect rigid body modifier on it. So I'm going to select them all again. We're going to open up our Mass Effects tools. Here it is. First thing I'm going to make sure, uncheck use high velocity collisions. This sort of basically turns it into a more accurate simulation at the cost of long simulation time. So uncheck it. Also down the bottom here under engine, make sure you've got use multi-threading and hardware acceleration enabled. That may speed up the simulation time. Okay, let's go to this tab here. So this is where we can actually set some rigid body settings. So you can see the rigid body type is dynamic. We don't want to use high velocity collision. Let's uncheck that. We want to use a preset. Let's change this to concrete. So you can see down here under the physical materials, it's all changed. So let's go to the simulation tab up here, and we'll just zoom in on these guys. I'm just going to deselect them, and I'm going to do a start simulation without, step simulation. So I'm going to click once and it'll move. You'll see down the bottom on the timeline here, it will step forward one frame. And you'll notice that these will settle a bit. Step forward another one. Okay, so I'm happy with it there. It's looking a little bit funny in places, but we can always not use this. And I just wanted to show you that you can actually start to settle these. So you can have some funny reactions though. So we're just going to go reset simulation. It's just going to reset it all. We're going to make sure that we select all these bricks again. So in here, let's go to the rigid body properties tab, and what we're going to do is go start in sleep mode. So now if we go back here and we go click on this one, start simulation, you can see that it's simulating, but these are just staying in the one place. So they're at rest, and Mass Effects recognizes that they are at rest. So I'll just click that again to stop the simulation, and I'll click on this back one to reset it. Okay, so now we've done that, we need to go in and animate our shell coming out of the artillery gun and passing through the wall. So let's go and do that. So I'm just going to close down the Mass Effects. Let's open up our Manage Layers, and let's unfreeze the artillery, and let's freeze the bricks. Okay, so let's hit F for front viewport. Let's zoom out a bit. Let's select the barrel up here and hit Z to zoom in. Let's hit F3 to go into wireframe mode. And in here you can see we've got a shell. You can select it by clicking on it there. If you have trouble selecting something in 3ds Max, you go up here to the select by name. So in here I can type in shell and it will go and select it. I'll do that again to demonstrate. You can see it's not selected, and it's gone and find it. If we've got more things in there, it might select all of them. So it's a handy tip to know. Basically what we're going to do now is we're going to look at animating this shell flying out of the, exploding out of the gun and passing through the wall. So typically you guys will have this up here, the reference coordinate system set to view. So if I select the shell and I move it forward, you can see it starts passing through the mesh of the barrel. And obviously we don't want this to do that. We want the shell to drive straight up through the barrel. So I'm just going to Control Z that, and I'm going to change our reference coordinate system to local. So you can see there now, if I move this forward, it goes straight out along the line of the barrel. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out and move it so I can see the gun and the wall. Okay, I'm going to move to frame 20. So this is where I want my projectile to start from, to start moving from. So to do that, on the time slider here, I'm going to right click. I'm going to go create key. Yours will look like this. So you'll have all three: position, rotation, and scale selected, and it will be source time is 20, so that's the time it's at now. And this is the time you actually want the key to be placed at. So I might want it at 40, so I can put in 40 there instead of moving this along. But we want it at 20 and 20. We want to uncheck the scale because we don't want to set a keyframe for that. We want to uncheck the rotation. We don't want to set a keyframe for that, but we do for the position. So we want to move it from here to here. We'll go OK. You can now see that there is a keyframe in there. But you can also see that there's no animation applied yet. We need to create 2 keyframes to make some sort of animation. So to do that, we're going to activate the auto key mode, which will automatically create a key. When we move the time slider, let's move it to say 36. And now I'm going to move the projectile up and through the other side of the wall. Okay, so I'm going to turn off auto key now. So you can tell it's a red border around there. So we only want to create keys at specific times. And if we don't turn this off, we could start to move other objects around and inadvertently start creating keyframes for them. And you obviously don't want to do that. So I'll just turn that off. So now we've got just hit play down here. You can see the shell comes out and then just ends up finishing behind the wall. The other problem we have is that by default 3ds Max will create a basically what we call a slow in and a slow out. So it will start off slowly, speed up, and be at top speed midway through the 2 keyframes, and then it will start to slow down again at the end. So we need to basically fix that because it will slow down at the end, but probably about 20 kilometers later. So it's going to be at full speed when it exits the barrel. So we're going to fix that up now. So make sure you have the shell still selected. Let's right click in the viewport anywhere. Let's go curve editor. So in here we've got the X. So you can see here the X. So we want to basically select the X position up here. Then we can mark here around these 2 points. So you can see in there we've got them selected. And we're now going to turn these into a linear rather than the slow in and the slow out. We're going to click on this one, set tangents to linear. So now it's just flat out the whole way. And we can close this down. So now the projectile comes out and it's just traveling at 1 speed. Okay. So the other thing we need to do with the projectile is turn this into a kinematic rigid body. So with it selected, let's click on this, click and hold down, go set selected as kinematic rigid body. So now it is part of the rigid body family. Let's click on the Mass Effects tools, and in here let's go to the rigid body settings. Let's change this to steel. Okay. And make sure it's convex. We're going to change the inflation type on it. So basically at the moment, if I zoom in here, you can see we've got this shell that's sort of covering the actual, this sort of covering for the shell. And we're going to increase that. Let's take it up to say 15. So you can see now the effect of that is going to be much bigger when it hits the wall, because this is the sort of area that Mass Effects will look at rather than the smaller area here. Okay, I'm also going to turn off use high velocity collisions, and we might turn that back on later depending on how the simulation goes. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Okay. Another thing we want to do is work out, so if I'll hit T on the keyboard to go in my top viewport, I want to work out where this shell exits through the wall. So 36 it is. So what we're going to do is on frame 36 we're going to turn this into a dynamic object, so it's going to be affected by gravity within the scene, so it's going to fall down. So we're going to click on this underneath rigid bodies up here until frame 36, so it'll be kinematic up until frame 36, where it will then become dynamic. Dynamic rigid body, that is. Okay, so I think we're ready to do a little test now. So if we maximize our viewports, and we'll have a look in the camera view. So let's click on the simulation and let's go start simulation. So it's going to start at 1, get up to 20, where it's going to fire the projectile. It's going to come out, it's going to hit the bricks, go through. And fall down later on. You can see it over here, it's touching the ground now. And the brick wall will now fall down. Okay, we're just going to stop that and we're going to reset it. With the shells still selected, let's go back here, and I might actually check use high velocity. Let's go and see if that makes any difference to the simulation. So once again, I'm going to run the simulation. We're going to see how it turns out. I think that's a little better. Okay, I'm just going to stop that. We might go back and adjust some of the settings of the shell here. So with it still selected, let's go back here. I'm just going to uncheck this, change this to none, and then I'm going to take the density up to say 500. There we go. Now let's go and do the simulation again. See if this has any effect by bumping up the mass of the object. No. Okay, we'll just finish that and reset the simulation. Okay, so what I've basically done is just inflated the actual shell again up to 30, and this is the effect I'm getting. So it's punching through, it's taking some of the bricks with them. We're going to go and just stop that and reset it. And now what I want to look at is creating some smaller chunks. We're going to use a script to do this. So I want to get the projectile as close to the wall as I can. There we go. I'm going to freeze the gun and just close that down for now. So in my top viewport, I'm going to maximize that. I'm going to select my bricks. I'm going to hit P and then hit Z to zoom in. I can see where my projectile is there. F3. I'm just going to deselect everything. You can see there where the projectile is coming through the wall. What I want to do is select some of this wall and actually make it into smaller chunks. So when the shell hits it, it pulverizes the brick. Okay, so to do that, we're going to make a selection. We want to make a roundy sort of selection here. So we're going to change to the select tool. We're going to change from the rectangular marquee down to the lasso. So in here, I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out an area that's sort of not quite even, like that. I'm going to now go right click and go isolate selection. I'm going to put this on its own separate layer. So you open up the manage layers click on Create New Layer Containing Selected Objects, and I'm going to call this Brick Fracture. There it is there. Okay, you'll notice that all these bricks have a Mass Effects rigid body solver on it, or modifier. Let's turn this back to rectangle. Let's select all this. Let's right click, convert it to an editable poly. That will remove that and convert all of these from just plain boxes to an editable poly. And what we can do is select one of them and click on under Edit Geometry here, the Edit Geometry rollout. Next to Attach, we've got the Attach list. So let's select this. Let's go select all. So we've now turned this into one object, which is going to make it a lot easier to use this script. So on the website, download the script from Learning Spot and put it on your desktop. To run a script, we go Mac Script, Run Script, navigate to where you've saved the script, double click on it, open it. So this is the FRA, fracture dialog box, and we're going to fracture this. So let's go pick object. We're going to click the object we want to do. Obviously, if these were all individual still, we'd have to do them all individually. So obviously that would take up a long time. So what we want to do now is we want to look at different parts. So let's take this up to say 20, and let's take the iterations up to 2. So you can see it's going to break it into 400 pieces, which is great. You don't want to go into the thousands or tens of thousands because it's just going to freeze 3ds Max. So let's go break into 400, and we've got a runtime error for some reason. Let's try it again. No, it doesn't like it. Let's close down that. Open up again. There we go. So just a little error before. If at first it doesn't succeed, try and try again. Okay, so there we go. You can see it's fractured it all. You can also see the original one still sitting in there. So there, I'm going to select it and hit delete. There's also another one for some reason. Must be one for every single brick. I don't know why that's happened. Deleted the wrong one then. Okay. I think this has happened because of my little error before. I'm just going to pause it and come back. Okay, I'm back. There was only about 15 of them. I don't know why that happened. I think it was because I had that runtime error with this script. So anyway, they've all gone. So now I've got individual pieces there. You can see as I moved it out. So I'm just going to Control Z that. All these should be on their own layer still. Okay. Just select them. Make sure they are by clicking the little plus button there. There we go. Some other stuff in there. Don't know what they are. And delete that. Okay, so now we've got these fractured parts of the brick in here. Unfortunately, because we can shut down that, unfortunately now we don't have any dynamic rigid bodies set to them. So the lucky thing is that we've got all these on their own layer, so we can go and select them all, and once again go and put a rigid body dynamics on them. Let's go in here, let's open up the Mass Effects tools. Let's look at this. Let's change the preset to concrete. Turn use high velocity collisions off. Make sure it's set to convex. Okay, so now we can go back to our simulator. Let's maximize the viewport. Go to our camera view. deselect everything, and let's do a preview simulation. Okay, let's just stop that and go back. One thing we need to do is to make sure that these start off in sleep mode. Now we can go back. Them. Projectile comes out, hits the wall. And knocks it all down. So that's looking fairly good now. So I'm pretty sure we can go ahead and bake that. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So stop this. Remember, this is only a preview. Take it back, and we can go now to bake all. So I'll click on bake all. It'll run through and bake in the keyframes. So turn it into an actual animation, and I'll just pause it and we'll come back after it's baked. So here we go, bake all. Okay, so the simulation's finished. You can see when I select all the bricks there, we've got all these animation keys. So let's have a look at this. So obviously this isn't in real time, so we might want to have a quick look at this in real time. So the way we can do that is go up here, click on the little plus sign. We can go create preview animation. Let's yep, that's fine. So now I'm going to create preview. Make sure that you're creating it at a decent resolution. You don't want it too small, and you can obviously increase the % of output. And obviously you want the active time segment to go. So let's go create. As you can see now down the bottom, once again, it's going to go through and create that. I'll just pause it and come back once it's done that. We can have a look at the preview. Okay, so I've stopped this at around about 180 frames. Let's hit play. So now you get the idea of what you've been creating. Okay. That's the end of this tutorial, and it should give you a good introduction on what you can do with rigid body dynamics and physics in 3ds Max using Mass Effects.